What's up, everybody? Welcome into Tom Curran's Patriots Talk podcast. It is the aftermath. The Patriots go down in defeat to the Buffalo Bills. Say this, Phil, who is on the move in Buffalo at the moment. Phil, this team is never uninteresting, is it?
Never, not once. They find interesting ways to lose, even when they lose, Tom. 4 turnovers today. And I thought this game sort of was their season in a nutshell. Just a horrible, inexcusable, ugly start. And you make it close at the end, but what does it really tell you about the team big picture? You know, same way they've been competitive late in the season here, but does it really change what happened early in the season and what a mess it was? So their season in a nutshell.
It is. And it's interesting, too, because there's so many subplots as these games go along, a Patriots team against a fairly mediocre Bills team. But it is chock full of subplots, of course, revolving around the head coach, Bill Belichick. Here's Bill's opening statement. We'll tell you what we think of some of the commentary from him and throughout his press conference on the other side of this. Bam.
Just, I would say, terrible first 20 minutes. Our guys really hung in there, battled away, but obviously, just gave them too big of a lead. Just couldn't quite get it back. Turnovers, obviously a big story in the game. Knocked the ball off Allen a couple times, but we couldn't get it. So, they had a big edge there. Martin did a good job, backed us up, all day. Kind of like the Charger game, so playing on a long field. But just can't make those kind of mistakes against Buffalo.
All right, Phil, not a completely downcast Bill Belichick, but what stood out to me and that statement and throughout Bill's commentary after the game was he has a pretty deep quiver of excuses from which to pull and fire into any argument that the team has underachieved. I mean, they are all right there at the ready. If it wasn't for turnover, if it wasn't for balls lying on the ground we didn't get to, if it wasn't for kickoff returns that got wiped out, things like that. To me, Bill has at the ready a deep well of excuses that he is going to dip into, or explanations, if you want to look at it that way.
Yeah, Tom, I guess I've come to expect that to a degree. And I mean, obviously he's not wrong, right? If you just get rid of those 4 turnovers, it's a completely different game. And boy, is that punter good. And he made us play deep from our own end. And yes, that's sort of how football works. You have to have a good enough offense to be able to overcome bad field position. You have to have a good enough offense not to turn it over 4 times. It's the same old story, Tom. They have the same reasons every single week as to why they lose. It starts on that side of the ball, the lack of talent on that side of the ball, and I think a lack of readiness to play. You turn it over 4 times, you're not ready.
Yeah, but Phil, they don't have Hunter Henry, and they didn't have Juju, and they had to sit Trent Brown down, and they don't have Cole Strange. Okay, I'm devil's advocating here. I mean, it's not Bill's fault. He's right. When he makes those excuses, when Matt couldn't play, he had to put Bailey Zappi, and they're out there with that. Come on. Can't blame Bill and say this is on him. That's a spunky effort, man.
I would say defensively it was. That was spunky.
Yeah, but what about the offense? They're up against it.
How many of those players you mentioned are game-changing players? Are any of them even Pro Bowl level? Never mind all-pro level?
No.
They're not. Right. And it speaks to the lack of depth on this roster and how the team's been put together. When you go in the tank because you lost Hunter Henry, I'm sorry, that's just not a good enough excuse or reason, whatever you want to call it, for the way they showed up and started this game early today. So I think it starts with the talent. I don't know if people are going to start looking at Bill O'Brien because of the turnovers or the lack of competency offensively or what, but I'd start with the talent and the personnel there on that side of the ball.
It actually amplifies your point when you look at the defensive side of the ball and realize the injuries suffered over there. When your starting cornerback has to be released, Jack Jones, and you're still able to run guys out there like Alex Austin or Keem Ayers, whatever his name is. Sean Wade, I know I'm insistent on the Keem Ayers. The number of players over there who are plug and play in a blueprint, Bill Belichick blueprint defense that is executed by Steve Belichick and Gerard Mayo. Answer me this, because this is the big story of 2023. Who do you credit for the defense? Bill, his coordinator, parentheses S, the coaches on individual units, or the players? You have to pick one.
I'm going to pick the players first because I'm very impressed by how they have continued to show up and play motivated football. Juwan Bentley smiled when I talked to him about a play he made late in the game on 3rd and 1. That's just how we get down. They're physical. They're aggressive. They show up in difficult spots. They take pride in the fact that, okay, we're going to be in the shadow of our own end zone 3 times. We're only going to allow field goals. And yeah, they got in the end zone on us once. And that's on us. You know, they allowed basically 1 touchdown drive in this game here today, Tom, to one of the best quarterbacks in football. And so I give the players credit first and foremost. Bill Belichick obviously gets credit because big picture, it's his scheme. But I had a lot of players commenting on and crediting their assistant coaching staff unprompted. You know, Gerard Mayo got a lot of praise. Christian Barmore called Gerard Mayo and DeMarcus Covenant. He said those 2 guys got to be 2 of the best coaches in the league. Dietrich Wise credited Mayo for the 2 game plans that they put together to slow down Josh Allen, make him look uncomfortable in 2 separate weeks. You know, Juwan Bentley again, when they get put in those adverse spots, he says, you know, Mayo and Steve Belichick, those are the 2 guys who get us ready for those situations. So that assistant staff should get a great deal of credit. I think it starts with Mayo. And Covington, to me, Tom, is somebody who might not be on this staff moving forward because he's so highly thought of around the league. He might get a DC job somewhere else. They have a very talented assistant coaching staff on that side of the ball. And I think it shows up on the field every week.
It's so interesting. So how close is this team if it has a blueprint defensively, players defensively, many of whom are under contract? Your Gonzalez, your Judons, your Tavais, so many of them, Barmore,
Godchop, Peppers. Yep.
They're all under contract. You have a blueprint. You have a well-coached group that is performing on a week-to-week basis, that has shut down the Eagles and held them to 1 touchdown drive, and has taken care of Tyreek Hill to a large extent and stopped Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, and done this all season long. You're not that far. This defense is there, but you're starting again, as I've said, from expansion level offense.
That's the problem. And then
So
you can't be there.
I don't know whether to be optimistic or not if I'm a Patriots fan.
You should be optimistic about the defense. You should. They're going to be okay there next year. But there's so much to fix offensively, Tom. You've got to get how many pieces right this offseason. You know, I'm going to assume that Bill O'Brien's back. That's just my belief as things stand right now. Okay. So you're assuming it's going to get better there because maybe he's able to bring in more of his staff. Tommy really only brought in 1 assistant coach this year, and Will Lying that he had a background with. So maybe he gets to fix his staff up a little bit the way he likes, but you have to get the quarterback right, whoever that is next year. You have to get both tackle spots right. If those guys don't end up coming back, and Trent Brown, I think it's safe to say, is not going to be back next year.
You need tight ends.
You probably need a tight end.
But
You know, Hunter Henry is not
up.
He's not under contract. Even Pharaoh Brown is not under contract. People like him.
Ezekiel Elliott is not under contract.
Fumble today. Yeah, so there's so many pieces there. You still need a true number 1 receiver. You need somebody who can make a play down the field for you in the passing game. It's a lot to ask to get it all fixed in one off season. And I think the worry should be, Tom, if you don't, that you don't have the defensive talent that you have under contract matched up time-wise, term-wise with, okay, when the offense is finally ready to go, we got the quarterback, we got the receiver. Well, now what's the defense look like? Because it might be 2025 before you get everything right on the offensive side of the ball.
Phil, the Patriots used to be a rolling shitstorm going through the league like Godzilla. Now they're toilet paper on their shoe. They're a mosquito around your head. And you eventually either remove the toilet paper or kill the mosquito. They're not an unstoppable force. But there is merit in being the toilet paper that's annoying or the mosquito that bothers someone for a while. But I think that the merit is going to be misread as promise. And I think about that as we look at these wins over Denver and Pittsburgh and competitive games with Kansas City and Buffalo and 6-0 against the Chargers, or all these games since Bailey Zappi came in, and think that people are going to mistake close and competitive for good.
I just don't know how they would get there on the offensive side of the ball. Because now, Tom, it now sits, the number ratchets up another level today. We are now at 8 one-score losses for the New England Patriots. 3 of those came in succession where they couldn't score 10 or more points. One of them today is where you have 4 turnovers, all offensively. They're not close on that side of the ball. They might be close on the scoreboard. They are not close to being a good team offensively. And that to me has to be the worry. And I know what they did last week against Denver. Doesn't that feel like a little bit of an aberration? That doesn't feel like the rule. That doesn't feel like what you can expect week in and week out. And I sat here and said, hey, bring Bailey Zappi back to be a backup next year. I'm totally fine with that. And I thought he made some nice plays today in terms of escapability and extending plays and finding guys. He made a great play to just avoid a safety at one point. But I don't know if you can depend on that. And so that to me, you're facing such an overhaul on that side of the ball. I really don't think that the close, competitive, tight on the scoreboard evidence that you have is really indicative of where they are as a football team because they're so far away on one side of the ball.
Let's hear from Bailey Zappi from today's post game and hear his recitation of the facts as he understands them.
Yeah, it's kind of like the same thing the last few weeks. You know, we're one Pittsburgh game, first half. Denver game was the second half. This game was the second half. You know, we're playing good. We're not putting 2 halves together as a entire offense and executing together and communication-wise and all those things. I mean, if you take away those 4 turnovers, what happens? Who knows? Can't go back, can't change it. Just got to move on. Got to fix the mistakes and get ready for another great team, another great defense in the Jets.
I almost spit out my coffee, even though I wasn't drinking any, when Bailey Zappi said, if it wasn't for the 4 turnovers. Is this where we are? If it wasn't for the 4 turnovers, if it wasn't for the flag, if it wasn't for it's just like the Chargers game. It's just like the Chiefs game. This team is absolutely eyeballs deep in excuse making, which sometimes great players or athletes have a tendency to blame other things and say, if it wasn't for that, I've been good, instead of being introspective and saying, boy, I might suck. And I don't think Bailey Zappi sucks. This is a developmental quarterback thrust in who's going to have days like this with inexperienced receivers. But he is a developmental backup quarterback. I don't blame him for sucking. But he's got to realize that the end of the rainbow's coming.
Did they realize as a team, Tom, what they are? Do they realize? Do they understand the reality of the situation? That's what I wonder, big picture, when I hear a comment like that, because I the players are told things over the course of a season, over the course of a day, on game day here. And I wonder if he heard that on the sideline somewhere, if he heard it in the locker room after the game. Hey, if not for those 4 turnovers, but we did have 4 turnovers, and so it turned out the way we did. Like, I just wonder, and I go all the way up to ownership. Are they aware of just how far they've fallen? Because I think that's the first step in really creating change, is you first have to understand where you are and the excuse making and the talking about the score, 1-score losses and all this stuff would be indicative of the fact that maybe they don't. And hopefully, I think, Tom, for fans' sake, they do, and they're willing to do things to rectify it.
I believe ownership does understand it. And that's the interesting thing. When you look at, what if about the Dallas game, 38-3. Well, what if Mac didn't throw a pick 6 and fumble? Well, let's look at the Washington game. What if Juju caught that pass? These are the players you decided to bring in. These are the guys you wanted, even if you want to duck it. Last question. We're going to get into this much more on Tuesday. Knee-jerk reaction. The Patriots can end up, if they win a 5th game, dropping all the way to 4. And they will also drop into a tie with teams like the Giants, the Chargers, potentially, and the Titans. They could potentially end up in ties and going to tiebreakers. It could bring them all the way, potentially, to 8th in the draft order. Bottom line is just don't win against the Jets. And I don't care about what the players think or what Bill Belichick thinks. Organizationally, you're shooting yourself in the face if you win that game.
But what if Bill Belichick isn't even thinking he's going to be here? He's trying to win. He's trying to get to a record. What is he going to do to make sure that happens? Aside from Robert Kraft smashing a Buffalo Wild Wings. We should be a no free ads podcast here, but a Buffalo Wild Wings button up in the owner's booth to blow, some massive gale force wind to take a Bailey Zappi attempt that should have been a touchdown pass and make it an incompletion. Like, I don't know what you do. The players are going to try to win, Tom. The coaches are going to try to win. Outside of, Robert Kraft, should he go down to the coach's office 90 minutes
It's a big deal.
time and
All
make
I'm saying, it's a big deal.
Should he make David Andrews inactive? Should he make David Andrews inactive before the game?
You can't
Healthy scratch.
You can't poop can Bill and then say, here, Gerard, go lose with this team. You lose that whole thing. So, all right, we got to give way here. Let's get into this more on Tuesday. Love you very much.
Okay, bye. Love you too.